Okay, so Zoom is now on, so we're ready to go. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the AIIA event, where we're looking at the future of international education in Australia. I'd like to start the evening by acknowledgement of country, and I acknowledge the people, the Jagera and Turrbal people, the traditional owners, and the custodianship of the lands on which we meet today. On behalf of the AIIA, I pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants, who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australia, to Australian and global society. So about tonight's topic. So the Australian International Education is a highly successful global brand and contributed more than $40 billion to the Australian economy in 2019. Despite this success, concerns were being raised about an over-reliance by educational providers on selected countries for student enrolments and international student fees as a key source of revenue. The impact of COVID-19 on the international student market was swift and unexpected. In the university sector alone, there were 210,000 fewer international students in 2021 than expected. University revenues declined by $1.8 billion, and almost 164,000 students remained stranded overseas. And the pipeline effects will continue into 2022 and 2023. While efforts are being made to bring students back through a number of pilot schemes, challenging questions remain about the future recovery of international education in Australia. How will the changing geopolitical landscape impact on diversification? Is there an optimum number of proportions of international students? Are student expectations changed as a result of COVID? Should universities focus more on growing international student enrolments online rather than onshore? Are different policy or regulatory settings needed to mitigate risk in the future? Will Australia regain its reputation as a destination for international education? How might a new international education strategy help Australia navigate and reset its direction post-COVID? Some very large questions to answer. And tonight we're joined by Professor Helen Bartlett and Rachel Glasgow, and they're going to take us through this particularly present topic and explain some of the backgrounds, where we are now and where we're going into the future. So I'd just like to introduce our guest speakers to you tonight. Professor Helen Bartlett is the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of the Sunshine Coast. She's had an international career in higher education, having held various leadership roles in universities across Australia, United Kingdom, Hong Kong and Malaysia. Most recently, she was Vice-Chancellor and President of Federation University of Australia, and before that, Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Chief Executive of Monash. Helen is a research specialist in healthcare and has undertaken research on the consequences of population ageing across Southeast Asia. She has led a number of research centres on ageing, including the Australasian Centre on Ageing at the University of Queensland. Helen holds a Bachelor of Arts, a Master of Science, Public Policy, and a PhD from the University of Bath. She is an expert member of the Australian Government Council for International Education, which is currently working on a new international education strategy for Australia. So a particularly important topic that we'll cover tonight. So welcome, Helen, and thank you for coming tonight. And on my left, I have Rachel Glasgow, Director of the RMC International Solutions, who has had 25 years experience across international education industry, including admissions, aid and development, program leader and business development. She has comprehensive and cross-sectoral expertise over diverse areas of the education industry. During her career, Rachel has worked in developing marketing and student recruitment initiatives across diverse countries, including South America, Middle East and Europe. Rachel is currently working as a consultant for the education industry and expertise in stakeholder engagement, marketing, business development, and communications. In her former role as head of education, she led Study Brisbane, working in partnership with Brisbane City and Brisbane's education sector to attract international students to Brisbane, enhance international students' experience, market Brisbane as a leading student destination, as well as providing opportunities for graduating students to retain a connection with the city. Rachel has mentored for the Australia Government's Pacific Women's Leadership Initiative and was member of the State Minister's International Education and Training Advisory Group. Rachel holds memberships of the International Education Association of Australia and the Asia Pacific Institute of Professional Learning. Welcome, Rachel. It's lovely to have you here again tonight. So you can see we have two amazing speakers who are joining us tonight, and we might just kick off by asking each to make an opening statement on this particular topic. And I'll go to you first, Helen.
Thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. So we were just talking before, a few days ago, about how we frame tonight's discussion. And we thought a good way to do it was to talk a little bit about history, the current position that we're in, and then looking to the future. And I think my starting point is a very positive one about the sector. It is, it has an incredible brand globally, the international education sector. It's taken many years to develop that brand. And I know Rachel's going to say more about this, but it did start not just with the Colombo Plan back in the 50s and 60s, but earlier than that, there were Chinese students coming to Australia, and it wasn't really until the Colombo Plan kicked off with a focus in a number of different Southeast Asian countries in particular, that the understanding of the role that international education played in the socioeconomic, cultural development of the member countries in the Asia Pacific really started to take shape. And during those years, I think, there was tremendous work done, and the reputation of Australian higher education quickly developed. And those origins are the ones to remember when you think about international education in Australia. Unfortunately, today, the focus in the media has been very much on universities grabbing money, using it to support their operations and so on. It's a very unfortunate sort of perspective that has been created. And there is a very long history up till today's point. And unfortunately, COVID has sort of thrown things, up in the air for international education and created a real crisis point for the sector. And some of that original goodwill that was created and was intended to be created by international education has been lost. It's got caught up in a lot of the dynamics of the geopolitical situation, and also some of the criticisms of universities for, needing to review their business models and not to be so dependent on international students. So that the backdrop is really, really important to remember, that international education in Australia is not just about revenue. It really is about creating soft diplomacy, country-to-country links. It's about also employment pathways for Australia, providing employment opportunities to fill skills gaps, even in regional Australia, where I happen to have worked for a few years now, where international students have made incredible contributions in a number of regional locations. So we have to remember the broader value of international education to the economy and beyond, to our communities, to our culture, to diplomacy, country-to-country diplomacy, to socio-economic development, and so on. So COVID has really thrown all of this up in the air. The focus has been very much on a criticism of universities for their over-reliance on international students. And just to put that in context, you know, about 10, 15 years ago, the public funding contribution to universities represented about 80% of the operational budget in universities on average. Today, it's on average about 40%. So universities have diversified enormously their revenue streams, and international students have been a big part of that. Anyway, with COVID, of course, we have seen now a sustained loss of new enrolments in the sector. And of course, the inability of many students who are enrolled to return to Australia. So many are stranded overseas, many are stranded here too, without families and support. And in all of this, again, I think the plight of those students has been somewhat lost in you know, some of those broader criticisms of the sector. Universities and communities have had to rally around to support international students. And certainly where I was working in Victoria, our local regional communities were amazing. They helped with, you know, through community, through kitchens to support our students, our staff, and domestic students all put their hands in their pockets to help, you know, with the daily living expenses of those international students who really were without so much of their support. Other amazing things happened. You know, our staff pivoted, to use that word, almost overnight to move our all of our teaching delivery into an online mode. So, you know, if we had asked staff a couple of years ago to do that, they would have laughed and said that's ridiculous. But they did it in 2 weeks, and that's exposed actually a couple of things. One is just how amazing you know, people can be in a crisis and how adaptable, and actually what they can do in a very short space of time. But it's also exposed the fact that we do need to do a lot more upskilling in that digital space for our staff, and I think that goes across all universities. We had never expected to be delivering our courses 100% online in such a short space of time, and we're still working through that. We've now gone back to more of a blended mode of delivery with predominantly students back on campus, but with more flexibility. So we discovered that actually our students are valuing the flexibility of that delivery. So having a mixture of face-to-face on campus, and they really want that, with the online for certain parts of their courses. And we're still working through that mix. It's not straightforward. And we're trying to cater to all the students' changing expectations. And that takes a lot of working through in terms of our teaching and learning environments, our digital skills, our learning platforms, and so on. But there's an awful lot of development happening in that space. So that's been a huge focus for universities, and you know, luckily my own university wasn't too exposed internationally. Many of our students were coming to the Sunshine Coast for the 1 semester experiences, study abroad, and the student mobility. So, you know, we're still missing those students, and it still has an impact in obviously in revenue terms, but in many other ways as well. You know, our campus is now really missing the diversity that international students bring to the learning experience, and our communities too are missing that. You know, international students have a much broader role to play in communities, and particularly in regional areas. So, you know, we're still working on getting things working more smoothly in the present, but looking to the future as well, thinking about what will international education look like for my particular university and other universities in general. We now are challenged in terms of our delivery mode. Student expectations are very different now. But we do know that international students are not flocking to online enrolments in their home countries. Some are, in the hopes that they will be able to get here before the end of their degrees and finish their degrees in Australia. But certainly the enrolment rate for online delivery of education is not replacing the on-campus in Australia enrolments, and I don't think it will either. So we've still got a huge gap there in terms of pre-COVID enrolments compared to today. So we're looking at, you know, what that mix might look like into the future, and what kind of strategy we will be rolling out. It will be very different to previous ideas. I think we'll be focusing a lot more on building partnerships with international universities, with overseas universities, on building pathway opportunities for students and articulations, potentially short courses, and, you know, thinking more generally about how we can shorten the duration of the study period for international students so they can get out into the workplace more swiftly. We're looking at building those relationships with industry, again, around enhancing international students' employment opportunities in Australia. And just to finish with a final comment, which, you know, all of these things I'm sure we'll talk more about, but as we're working through the International Education Council on the new strategy for international education in Australia, we're very focused through a lot of consultations now on engaging everybody in helping to map out what this future might look like. The student, of course, is at the centre of all of this, and we have to, I think, reimagine how we support those students in the future, in particular, protecting them, you know, risk mitigation around things like this happening again, thinking about students' mental health more than we've ever thought about before. That's something that has really been very prominent in all of this. And also thinking about what our regulatory environment is going to look like. This is raising some very tricky issues, I think, for the future. To what extent universities, you know, can work within a guidance framework for future models of and strategy around international students, or to what extent the regulatory framework changes to some extent to mitigate against future crises occurring again. So I'm happy to revisit some of those things, but that's my my kind of opening overview on where I think we are. I remain very positive. I think actually COVID, well, it's had a huge impact on the sector, not just universities, but, you know, on VET, on schools, on ELICOS, English language. I think that it's been the disruptor that probably we needed to some extent, probably not quite this extent, but I think we are seeing some innovation coming out from this period, which has been really tough.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Rachel. I'll hand over now, Helen. I'll hand over now to Rachel for your opening remarks.
Thanks, Helen. So lots of content to sort of digest there. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what international education is and the view of international education, as well as what is the value proposition that Australia has. Why do students actually want to come or engage with Australia. So the first point is around, whilst universities are a very, very important part of our sector, they make up about 40%. So students are about 40% go to university. The rest is made up of schools, early cost providers, as Helen mentioned, vocational education and training. Now, the pathways that those students take, if they come into school, they might pathway into higher programs such as vocational education and university, or they might transition and pathway into a job here in Australia for a couple of years, and the visa regime allows that to happen. So there has been a lot of focus in the media about universities and the impact of universities with financial, but the impact has been much, much broader than universities. Private colleges and vocational education and training, 80% of those are private businesses. So they are small to medium. A lot of the times there are large enterprises, but they're small and medium businesses who do a very, very important job. They pathway students through English language into the universities or into vocational courses into universities. And a lot of those colleges have shut down. A lot of those businesses have disappeared. A lot of people have lost their jobs. I think I worked out about through this crisis and with international students not being able to get in, about 7% of the workforce in international education has lost their job and been made redundant. That's a big loss of talent for the education sector as well. So I think that's really important to take into account, as well as the impact on students, that it has impacted the Australian workforce, mum and dad businesses, pathways to university as well. The whole pipeline has been disrupted. It's not just the universities, the whole pipeline. So that's one of the first points I wanted to make. I also wanted to add to Helen's point as far as what is the value proposition for Australia and what does international education bring to Australia. So to look forward, as Helen said, you need to look back. I think it was 1923, Helen, that the first international student was enrolled at the University of Sydney. It was a Chinese student studying teaching. Back in 1920s and then forward to the 50s and 60s and the Colombo Plan, international education was all about soft diplomacy. It was about educating emerging leaders in our geopolitical and the Asia Pacific, so that once they became leaders, they would have a natural affiliation and connection with Australia. I will say that that was extremely successful. We have a lot of leaders in business and politics who are educated here in Australia. One of the things I'm passionate about with international education at a very grassroots level is that students travel overseas, and this is Australian students going overseas or international students coming here, and they have transformational experiences. They have experiences which shape them as leaders, as adults, and shapes their futures. And that's really exciting, and it's exciting that we can become a part of that. But as part of that transformational experience, you also have then an affiliation to the location or the university or the vocational college and the friends that were part of that experience. So that is a big part of the value for international education here in Australia. It is actually creating that soft diplomacy and connections. The second thing is around local students and how it enhances their education. You know, Australia, at the moment we are in a little bubble, but Australia works in an international context. So Australian and domestic students need to know different international perspectives. They need to know wherever people are coming from. And you get that if you sit in a room of other students or peers who have got different backgrounds from you. The third thing is around skills and talent. Australia is a small nation and we need to source talent from elsewhere other than Australia. You know, we can't recycle our economy. International students are a fantastic source of talent, a fantastic brain trust, who are educated here but have perspectives internationally, which, you know, I mean, what a better position to be in to, you know, look at skills gaps and fill skills gaps with international talent coming over. Of course, there is the economic impact. And unfortunately, as Helen said, that is what all the focus has been in. International students do provide revenue into our economies, and they are a very, very important part of the economic makeup, I guess. But I think we've just lost focus of those other three things, and the new international strategy does point that out. But those three things was the original reason why international students started coming to Australia, and why Australia started accepting them. I'm going to move from our point of view and the benefits to why international students, what are the decision drivers of why international students come here. The value proposition that Australia has is the experience. It is about actually coming and engaging with Australian society. It is about the on-campus experience, and it is about the high-quality education. But the high-quality education and the content is only part of the reason why international students come here. And I think that is a very important point to make as well. So looking at the history with all of that background, why international students are important for Australia and why Australian international students want to come to Australia, we look at the different ways. So Colombo Plan was about in the 50s and 60s attracting students here so that we could build a team of advocates in leadership positions in Asia Pacific. Very, very successful. Around the mid-80s, through government policy, the cap was taken off the number of international students that could be enrolled. So created probably a wave of commercialisation of international education. And this is really the root of when money started to be the forefront of driving international education. That lasted probably to the 1990s, where we had a crisis in the industry. It was sort of a perfect storm around a crisis of student safety with a number of attacks around Indian students. We also had the global financial crisis and the recession. And for the first time since the 80s, we had a decline in international students. We rebuilt after that, and we had just reached levels and surpassed the levels of international students in the country. So I think that is important. That history is really, really important. I'm sorry, I'm probably taking far too much time. I just want to pick three things just so we can carry on. And that is just going back to a couple of observations. Every time we've had a crisis in international education, government policy has been a driver and has around that. And we have lifted up despite that. So border closures, whilst it's keeping Australians safe, that has been the crux of the crisis here. The second thing is that international students and those additional reasons why it's important to have international students here needs to be forefront of our minds. And the third thing is of why international students come and what is the value proposition for Australia. And it is the experience. I really want to keep those three things forefront of our minds.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was very comprehensive. And I think, I've got two people here who are clearly very passionate about the topic. And obviously this is an area that we can talk about a lot longer than we have tonight. So we might move on to some of to some other areas. So we were talking earlier tonight about the social licensing around international education and the failure of lobbyists in this space at this time. Did you want to kick off there, Helen, and just have your comments on that particular point? I'll hand over to Rachel so she can jump in as well and have a bit more of a conversation.
And so, when we talk about social license, what we're meaning is, I guess, the public perceptions towards the sector. And at the moment, in terms of what's been said about international students and I guess the way in which throughout COVID, international students have not received much government focus in terms of facilitating a return, although that is starting to shift a little bit now. But the social license towards the sector, I think, has become, from a public perception point of view, rather negative, where, international students are sometimes misguidingly thought to be taking the places of domestic students, where they are really just about boosting the university's coffers, and this all leads to very negative downward spiral about universities not managing their businesses well and wasting money and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting to see how this negativity sort of starts to compound itself with a lot of misperceptions about international students, why they're here, what their value is, and what their contribution to the country is, which is why we're talking about the history here, to try and build that better understanding. And I guess, to a large extent, I mean, all the education providers have perhaps not done themselves any favours because they haven't been able to articulate that value in a consistent way and perhaps draw on many of the very incredibly positive experiences and case studies of international students and what their contribution is. So it's very hard to make up that ground right now when we're in the middle of the crisis. It's almost impossible. And we're not going to see, and that's been evident over this year so far, we're not going to see special considerations in terms of quarantine for international students before our returning Australians have been dealt with. So, that is changing. We've just heard South Australia's quarantine proposal for international students has been approved. It looks like New South Wales might follow, so that's good. But the numbers will be relatively small for the rest of this year. But nevertheless, I think it's an opportunity for us to show that we can do that well, that international students are not going to jeopardise any of the communities in which their quarantine facilities are going to be located. If we do that really well, then I think, the sentiment should gradually start to improve. But it is a pity that we've got to this stage when, we haven't actually been able to get positive stories out there, and there are so many. And now is not a great time to be trying to do that. So that's why we're looking to the future, to recast the international education strategy in Australia, to get all the stakeholders on board in recasting the story and what the future might look like.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You just have to look at really the comments and the media comments with newspaper articles around international education to really see the sentiment. I was saying before, I was reading a report back from 2004, which I think was the first report that Access Economics did for the sector around what is the value of international education to Australia. Because even back in 2004, as a sector, we were trying to promote ourselves around, we are an important part of the economy, and we do provide benefits to the broader sector. And in that, we talked about the broader benefits of international education, how it was really important to bring the community along with us. And we just haven't done it. It's really unfortunate. We're really good at talking to ourselves and talking to the sector. We just need to have a good look at our channels of communication and really getting them out. You can have individual stories. There was an individual story the other day of an international student, which was posted on LinkedIn, giving somebody their COVID jab. We had a skills shortage in nurses a little while ago, so we had a lot of students come in from Philippines, for example, and other nationalities who have now are working in the front line to fight against COVID. It's those kinds of stories. An international student worked with, one of our academics to invent Gardasil here at the University of Queensland and with TRI. That kind of story and those kinds of outcomes, we are just not very good at telling people. So, yeah.
It's interesting you should say that, because within the universities, we do celebrate our professional students. I mean, we do go out of our way to highlight successes and their contributions to our communities. It's taking it outside the universities themselves that can be the challenge. And at the moment, I think the challenge is, during this COVID pandemic, it's very difficult to get a positive story about this particular topic. So yes, it is an interesting, within the universities themselves, I think we do quite a good job. And I sort of want to reflect a little bit on the human face as well of the international student. And working in a university, I do see that, and the mental health issues that came out of last year were quite horrendous. And people were not as sympathetic as I thought they might be. So that's something that I think just in ourselves we need to think about as well, that people are dealing with their own situation. So the capacity to go broader sometimes I think is limited. But I hope that doesn't affect the future. And that's something we need to think about as well. The human face of what we're talking about here is sourced, and the human face needs to be front and centre. So thinking more about that social licensing and the lobbyists and everything, that's really something in the past. So looking at I love the disruptive phrase. I think definitely COVID has been a disruptor, and it's sometimes comes out of in times of struggle that something like this comes along. So our expectations around international students have changed at this particular time, and we've obviously got to look forward to what we do next. And you're part of this planning, this advisory and planning group. Do you have any insights that you'd like to share with us as to where you're thinking and where your direction is? Just the fact that there's limited numbers of students coming back into the country, and who those students would be. Who would be the priority students that would come back in these programs?
So in terms of the work that's going on with the international education strategy, there are hundreds of different groups that have been consulted. So it's been a very extensive process. And that's been terrific. I don't think it's ever been as extensive with previous versions of the international strategy. So that's great. I think that everybody's been very engaged with this. And I think one of the things that's coming through is that, people are very concerned about making sure that we do have an immediate plan that relates to COVID, because we're not over this yet, and people want to know what is the short-term plan to get us through this immediate period. And then obviously into the long term. I mean, the strategy is a 10-year strategy, so it needs to incorporate this phase and then set out the pillars for moving forward. And as I said before, the strategy and all the consultations have emphasised that students have to be at the middle, at the centre of all of this. After all, that makes sense. And then around that, we need to really focus on in thinking about international strategy, connectivity, what this means for Australia in terms of that diplomacy and socioeconomic development in our broader region, in terms of diversity as well. One of the criticisms of the sector is that it's focused on too few countries and hasn't been terribly adventurous in terms of developing that broader, diverse range of international students. So that's very much part of the thinking around how we do achieve that diversity in the future. Quality, really critical. That has to be front and centre in everything we do. That's Australian education is known for its quality, for its excellence in terms of its standards and how it's regulated. These are things that have really led to the success of the brand of Australian education. So we have to ensure that quality is maintained and continue to improve. And we also have to think about innovative delivery. We can't just keep on doing the same. We've already changed, but into the future, we have to think even more about what kind of blended models of delivery can we facilitate for international students? How will those models be supported by our regulatory body, by our immigration and work visa sort of strategies, and a whole raft of other things. So as we're changing the way in which we deliver and position our products, we have to think about the environment in which what we need to do within that environment to facilitate those innovative new models.
It's this is an opportunity to really look at what the decision drivers are for students, why and how Australian as an education brand can deliver on those as well. I think, again, going back right in the 1920s, 1950s, 1960s, it was all about coming to Australia to get a better quality education. Now it's about return on investment. Now it's all about the careers. So the education is not the journey, it is part of the journey. And I think if you change mindset to look at that, you can work more closely with industry, you can look at hybrid models of delivery where education is only part of the journey. So imagine a place where students know right from the beginning what kind of skills that they're good at, soft skills, what kind of educational journey, training, competencies they need in order to get there. And getting a qualification or even getting a micro-credentialing or getting a competency is just part of that journey. So I think as an education sector, we need to look more broadly about how we influence and how we create a more broader ecosystem where education is core to that.
Yes, absolutely. So I might open the questions from the floor now that we've sort of had a comprehensive overview of the topic. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask our panelists tonight? Paul Lucas.
Thanks very much, Diana and the panel. it seems to me, and if you're the audience here tonight, over half the audience would be overseas born. And I'm unashamedly, as most people here are, pro-migrant. It's made this country what it is. So shouldn't we, and obviously people who are coming from overseas make a choice, a positive choice to be here. I'll put it to you both, and I think Rachel, you've certainly strongly emphasised this, that a real factor is that pull factor. And if as a country we say we want to quite rightly choose the shape of our workforce and look at areas of critical shortage and the like, whether offering overseas courses online is not, the key driver. It's getting people in Australia educated to Australian standards and capable of staying here, and I hope they do, and contributing to our economy. And while they're here, paying to stay at places, buying food, getting a job. Isn't that the essence of what we really want from our self-interested point of view as a nation in overseas education? We want to educate a lot of people and get them to stay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. That is, it is a major part of the proposition here. And, as I go around in my university, which is located in many different communities, from rural to regional to peri-urban, and you look at the ongoing skill shortages in some of these communities, in the healthcare professions, in teaching, and in IT and business. And we have been able, through the Destination Australia scholarships, to bring international students supported into those communities who are now part of the workforce, and absolutely loving it. And if only we had the facility to do more of that, I think the Destination Australia initiative is the sort of thing that we should be doing to help target those skill shortages and build, more diverse communities.
Yeah, I just wanted to putting my marketing hat on, Paul, and it's a great question. I think that the value proposition at the moment for international education is the experience here in Australia. That is not to say that there is an opportunity to build another product, I guess, or another brand of Australia, which is online education. But I think we need to be very realistic that once we go online, why would a student enrol online to an Australian institution when they can enrol in Berkeley or Oxford or Cambridge? What is our value proposition online? And I think at the moment, a lot of students have gone to online, but it is not a permanent solution. It is a pathway to get here. And the student surveys have certainly shown that. So we need to keep that in mind. It's not an easy, we'll just transition.
Thanks to Helen and Rachel. I love your positive outlook. We're in a crisis, but as you've pointed out, there's deep roots to our international student experience and a strong brand there as well. I'm just wondering, how concerning is it to you, the dramatic worsening of relations between Australia and China? I mean, China is our #1 source of international students, but in the past 2 years, the Chinese government has been punishing the Australia through trade and other means for its sort of fairly aggressive stance against China. And I also think that there have been some attacks on Asian Australians in Australia, and people from Australian Chinese organisations have been highlighting these. This will have gone back to China. How concerning is the current situation with China?
Would you like me to talk about that, Helen?
Look, of course, universities are working within that geopolitical environment at the moment. I would say that we're all managing to navigate our way through it. It's not going to stop Chinese students being interested in Australia, I think. You know, at the end of the day, you know, students choose largely where they want to go. And I don't think it will diminish the popularity or the reputation largely about Australian education. We have to navigate the geopolitics and be very careful around all of that, of course. I think there will be an adjustment. But you know, when you're looking at international education, things will never stay the same forever. I mean, look at Singapore. You know, Singapore now has world-class university education in its own right, and is importing, you know, overseas labour into that sector. So, you know, things do change. China's education system is galloping ahead. So we can't expect things to remain the same. And I think it's healthy that we see an adjustment, and the geopolitics will change. As an education provider, an academic leader, we have to expect that we navigate that. But remember that at the end of the day, the students are our focus, and the education that we provide, the quality of that education is paramount, and the experiences that they get, and the opportunities as graduates, that has to remain our focus.
Thank you.
Did you have anything to add?
No.
Apparently, we have some online questions. We have some from the audience, and then we have some online questions.
Thank you. Let me first congratulate both the speakers. I really benefited from what you had to say. And I worked with Rachel, you know, a few years ago, and I'm very pleased to see her again. I think I'm a beneficiary as well as a producer of education in Australia. I was here in the late 70s, and when I got the scholarship to come here, a lot of people said, "Why are you going to Australia? You know, you don't even know about the country. Why don't you go to Cambridge or some other place?" But for whatever reason, I chose Australia. I came here, and I'm glad that I did, because one thing I learned about Australian education is it allows you to think that in many other universities that I have been to now, I go to as a visiting professor, I don't see that freedom. So that's something very important that we contribute. Now, in terms of the challenges that the Australian international education face at the moment, there are actually two challenges. One is COVID, obviously, but I think we'll overcome it in this couple of years or so. But the second challenge is what I think is geopolitics. And I think that will not only impede our educational relationships, but also our economic relationships at many, many levels. And the way I see education, not only in terms of its economic benefits, cultural or intellectual benefit, but I think international education for Australia is absolutely key in trust building. Because here we are a society in a very alien cultural environment, and trust building is key to our long-term survivability. And that is absolutely important. So I don't know how exactly we can do it. And we must also realize, although we are saying that we can pick and choose students from different countries and all that, and we're adjusted, that's absolute nonsense. Because we live in a globalized world, which works on two bases: capacity to produce and capacity to purchase. So you really have to look at who can buy your product, not you pick and choose your buyers. So the idea would be there are obviously some risks somewhere. So the idea to live in a globalized world is to minimize risks and maximize opportunities, and not to take one brick wall kind of position. And I think that's what is a bit problematic. And I also feel that when you elect a government, we don't elect a government to bugger up things that's working, and we elect a government to do new things that's not working. So that's my position. It's an observation, but I'd like to understand.
Thanks, Professor. A couple of things around this, and I would like to put a third kind of layer on this, which we have kind of talked about fleetingly, but that is the disruption of education itself, the traditional modes of education with industry. And again, I go back to what is the outcome? Why do people become educated? 9 times out of 10, of course, there's the academic pathway, there's the research pathway, but there is also a career outcome. And so we need to be talking to industry about how do we get a future workforce educated, trained to the point that they want to. And I think geopolitically, that is the same issue everywhere. As Helen said before, we've always had peaks and troughs. We've always had flows from different countries at different times when their economic development plans have required more educated or skilled personnel in particular areas that they can't deliver. They've exported. When they've decided to become international hubs themselves, they've stopped exporting. So there are a lot of different things which we need to work through, but there is an opportunity with this disruption to take that and look at what we are doing and improve what we are doing for the benefit of the student.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I might just ask Ben for the online questions that we have.
Firstly, thank you both for such a very fascinating discussion. Here's a question from Colin Forrest, who's watching online. Has the quality of the work being produced by the international students online been generally as good as the work they produced when they were here in the country on campuses?
That's a good question. We've just had some evaluations undertaken of the international students' experience with online, and I think it's true to say they're not as happy as they would have been if they were receiving their education face-to-face on campus. I can't comment on the quality of the students' work, but I think they are not as satisfied with that mode of delivery, and I think it doesn't maximise their opportunities to really engage with the materials in the way that many of the international students prefer, which is that face-to-face, receiving the support of their peers and students and the academic staff. I think you can't really get away from the importance of having that support around them.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, I totally agree with that. I mean, talk about different time zones and students having to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to attend a lecture because it's anywhere they can really ask a question. Not everybody wants to see a recording all the time. So there's a lot of stresses on that. I guess people haven't been particularly happy, understandably. We've done our best under the circumstances. And I think, unfortunately, that really comes, that's as much time as we have for this evening's discussion. I think we've been here quite some time to discuss the border issues, but you've done an amazing job. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Helen, for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts and perspectives and giving us some hope for the future, I think, as well. So I'll hand over to Paul Lucas, who'll take us formally to the end of our session tonight.
Thanks very much, Diana, and thank you to our great speakers tonight. It's been really wonderful. Very edifying. Thank you to the audience for coming. I feel like the booth announcer, really. I actually am here. Can I just put a plug in for 2 future events coming up? And if you subscribe to our website, you'll get them in the mail, but they're also on our website. On the 6th of July, we've got His Excellency Mark Glasgow, who is the High Commissioner to Australia from Canada, coming to speak to us. He's speaking on middle power diplomacy making a difference. We've seen very much, perhaps under the Trump administration, the disappearance of statecraft and how important it is, in fact, avoiding people getting killed in wars starting. And so it will be very interesting to hear from another middle power. So that's both in person at Holding Red Lake here in Brisbane and online. On the 13th of July, online, we'll be having former World Bank President Robert Zoellick speaking on his book on a similar theme, really, America in the World, A History of Diplomacy. So again, that's one online only, that one, because he will be coming into the United States. Plus we've got some other ones coming up as well, and we put them periodically on our website. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming. And thank you for our speakers, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event.